in Genesis chapter 37, and we're reading the story of Joseph, who brought unto his father the evil report of his brothers, and as he had done so, he also had several dreams. And I have made the statement that I thought rather that the dreams were daydreams, though it does not clarify that in the scriptures. And of course, the father and the brothers were a little uptight about these dreams. Now, I'm going to go back very briefly to Genesis chapter 35. And there we're going to see something about Rebekah. Verse 16, and they journeyed from Bethel, and there was but a little way to come to Ephrath. And Rachel travailed, and she had hard labor. And it came to pass, when she was in hard labor, that the midwife said to her, Fear not, you're going to have this son also. And it came to pass, as her soul was in departing, for she died, that she called his name Benoi, but his father called him Benji. Benjamin was his name. And I believe here that, according to the way I understand it, that Benjamin would just have been just a little feller, a little guffer, anywhere up to maybe around the age of 3 or something like this, when Joseph would have been about 17 years old. Maybe if some theologians have some definite knowledge on this, I would appreciate knowing the facts about it, but that's about what I can glean at this point. So we find then that Joseph was asked to go by his father down to Dothan, there to give his brothers some food to help feed them while they're looking after some sheep. And we find that the brothers, in verse 18, notice that Joseph is coming a little ways off. And they said to one another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. Ah, here comes this dreamer. We have a saying today, and this is why I think that Joseph was daydreaming. We have a saying that says, Oh, you dreamer, you. And that means a person is having daydreams, right? Some children sit in school, and they sit and look out the window, and they don't do any schoolwork. And of course, the parents go over to the school, and the teacher says, Look, your child is just a dreamer. They just sit and look out the window and do nothing but daydream. So I associate it with that, and that's why they say, Oh, here comes this dreamer you. Anyway, the story is such that they decide that they don't want him around any longer, and they were thinking of killing him. But the older brother says, Look, no, let's not touch him. Let's not touch him at all. We can't kill the boy. They put him into a pit and kept him there. And finally, when the older brother was away at the time, the other brothers found some Midianites that were passing through town. Call them gypsies or whatever you want, but nonetheless, they were passing through town and passing by the way of that pit. And they saw them and said, Look, let's sell Joseph to these people. And so they brought him up out of the pit, and they sold him to the Midianites, and they took his coat of many colors. They killed an animal, dipped the coat in the blood, and tried to tell their father then that Joseph had been killed by a wild animal. Now we note then in verse 36, the Midianites sold him to Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and captain of the guard. And that's chapter 37. I would like to, if it's at all possible, to get just a little bit of a picture here before we go further. The human side of this story. And I'm not going to go into any great depth, because those of you who are trained in the scriptures know that it was a very sad thing. But you see, the gifts of the Spirit are oftentimes exercised out of great adversity. They don't always come to people who are standing up in the pulpits on Sundays and preaching sermons, and people who are constantly enjoying life and living on every minute of every hour of every day. And God often prepares people, and sometimes great adversity comes, and the gifts of the Spirit are exercised out of this. You see, I have a son. And I remember when he was 17 years old. And the very thoughts of this young man being sold to a band of gypsies going through town by his sisters would have been the most horrible thing that I could ever think of. And so to me, my heart aches when I think of the thoughts of it. not only from my standpoint of view being the parent, but what about the poor child? You know, the devastation of it, taken and uprooted out of the large family, taken away out of every known circumstance that he was in, and only 17 years old. That would be heart-rending. I am sure at that point that Joseph would likely say, God, where are you? Why are you allowing this to happen to me? I don't deserve this. What did I do to deserve it? But we find in chapter 39 that something happened. Joseph was brought down into Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, brought him out of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down there. Oh, I like this. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and made him overseer over his house. And all that he had he put into his hand. And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not what he had, excepting the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. I don't know what could be better said about men and women of God. A goodly person and well favored. You know, the scriptures say a good name is rather to be chosen than great riches. Now, the way I see it, if you can have both, great. But if you had your druthers, you would be better off to druther have a good name. I see here something very significant, and I'm trying to draw all of these facts out because they're going to be so very, very important when we come to the exercise of these gifts of the Spirit, so that we can relate to them, not just because it's Joseph back here in the Bible, but because we can say, yes, I can see where it can benefit me today. Managers, I know there are many managers watching. Managers of oil companies, managers of research departments, managers of all types of work. And I'm going to tell you, you can exercise the gifts of the Spirit in the management position. And God will honor you for it. Let's look and see. Because you see, Joseph is learning at this point management. We know that you as a manager did not get into that position overnight. You were trained, you learned the twicks of the trade, you learned all about it. And then you came into that position because you were trained in it. What's that got to do with the gifts? It's going to have a lot to do with the gifts. But you see, if Joseph had been left down in Dothan, he never ever would have learned management. And God was bringing him into a place to exercise the gifts of the Spirit for his own glory. And we'll see how this takes place. So Joseph, of course, is managing Potiphar's household, and he does a fantastic job of it. Now we see something else happens. And in fact, Potiphar's wife decides to seduce Joseph. And Joseph is not about to be seduced. He is a godly man, and he says, look, I will not succumb to this sort of thing. So he fled out of the house. And of course, Potiphar's wife grabbed a hold of his coat and hung on to it, and he kept right on a-running. Anyway, she was rather disturbed with this. Her pride had been hurt. And so she went to Potiphar and said, look, Joseph tried to seduce me. She was lying about it. It would appear that Potiphar believed his wife. For some reason or other, the situation is such that he takes Joseph and throws him into prison. Now again, you say to yourself, my goodness, here is this young man, and he's first of all, he's sold to a band of gypsies going through town, and he earns his right to a good name again. And because he has done right and he doesn't do evil, he is seemingly punished again for no unknown reason. Now, it would appear that he didn't bemoan his fate. It would appear, according to the way I can understand in the Scriptures, he never complained and never beefed about it. But nonetheless, we see here that verse 21, the Lord was with Joseph even while he had been put in prison. and showed him mercy, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. And the keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. Isn't this amazing? Joseph gets out of one management position and he's put right back into another one again. He's now managing all of the people in the prison. Well, now we're going to start to get into the exercise of the gifts. It came to pass that after these things that the butler and, of course, the baker of Pharaoh, for some reason, they did something that was contrary to Pharaoh's will, and he was cross with them and threw them in the prison. It says that they dreamed dreams, and apparently these were definitely night dreams. It specifically says night dreams here. And when they got up in the morning, and Joseph, of course, came into their cells to look after them, it says that they were sad. They were looking very strange that morning, and Joseph comes in, he says, "Hey, what's the matter with you guys anyway? Why are you looking so sad?" And they said, "Well, look, we dream dreams, and we don't understand them. And we don't know anybody around that can interpret them to us or tell them what they mean. Tell us what they mean." Oh, I like verse 8, because Joseph says, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them, I pray you." Now, this is not the gift of the interpretation of tongues. Neither is it the gift of interpretation in the sense of knowledge. It is the exercise of the gift of the word of knowledge. And the chief butler told the dream to Joseph, and he said to him, "In my dream, behold, a vine was before me. And in the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, and her blossoms shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's hand, and I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand." Now, right now we begin the gift of the word of knowledge. Joseph is now going to reveal to the butler the meaning of his dream, something that is humanly impossible to do. Watch it here. This is the meaning of it. The 3 branches are 3 days, yet within 3 days will Pharaoh lift up your head and restore you to your place, and you will deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand after the former manner when you were his butler. And think on me when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here I have done nothing that they should put me into this dungeon. You see, Joseph knew that the meaning of the dream, the revelation that he had given, was true and correct. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said, "Look, when you get back into Pharaoh's house, into his keeping there, where you're back put into your position as the butler again," he says, "Don't forget to tell Pharaoh that, I don't deserve to be here." And of course, the butler agreed. "Hey, fantastic, I would be glad to do that for you." Then we know the chief baker said, "Hey, I like the meaning of your dream." He says, "Now tell me what mine means." Verse 17. Well, the last part of verse 16 says, "I also was in my dream, and behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head. And in the uppermost basket there was all manner of baked meats for Pharaoh, and the birds did eat them out of the basket from my head. And Joseph answered and said," now here again, Joseph reveals to him, and this again is the word of knowledge. And he says, "This is the meaning. The 3 baskets are 3 days, and yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up your head from off you, and will hang you on a tree, and the birds shall eat the flesh from off you." Ooh. Oh, my goodness. Well, we're looking at the Old Testament again, and we said that sometimes these people said the word and the will of God. I don't believe that the word that was given to the baker would have brought any fear. It could very well be that the man would have sensed that, "Hey, I don't really care for that meaning of that one," but nonetheless it wouldn't have hit him head on until the time came for him then to be hung, and then he'd have said, "Yeah, that's for real, all right." We note something, that Pharaoh did exactly what Joseph had revealed and said that he would. And it says he restored the chief butler to the butlership again, and he gave the cup to Pharaoh's hand, and he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. And oh yes, by the way, verse 23 says, as to use my terminology, to throw in just for free. The chief butler just very conveniently forgot Joseph. He never even remembered it again. He never said a thing to Pharaoh. Now, when we start chapter 41, we find that Joseph is now about 30 years old. Remember, he was 17 when he was sold out, right? 17. This is very significant because I got a special story to tell you on this one. It came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by a river. And if you would continue to read down through chapter 41 for a little while, you will see what the dream is, but I won't read it through several times. We'll skip it and read it to you when we get ready to bring you the meaning of the dream. Verse 9, then spoke the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, well, maybe we ought to go back to verse 8, because after Pharaoh woke up after he had seen the vision, or the dream, it says that in the morning his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men, and Pharaoh told him his dream, but it says there were none that could interpret them. Now at this point, the butler scratched his head, and he said, say, listen, Pharaoh, you know what? 2 years ago, there was a fellow down there in the prison, Joseph by name, and you know, myself and the baker had a dream. And he said he told us exactly what it was and what it meant. And he said, why don't you call him up, and maybe he can tell you what the meaning of that dream is. So they called Joseph up from the prison. I want you to look at verse 14 specifically. I like this. You know, some of the things that are written in here that are everyday common occurrences, we just walk all over it. We don't even think that it has any significance at all. It says, Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. And he shaved himself and changed his raiment. Would you like to underline that in your scriptures? You say, well, what's so significant about that? It's going to be very significant because it is going to show us something about the gift of the word of wisdom that's just going to cause you to have to hold on to your false teeth and plug your hearing aid in a little bit better. Now, Pharaoh says unto Joseph, I've dreamed a dream. And he says, there's no one that can interpret it. And I understand that you are able to do this. Let me say before I go further, the gift of the word of knowledge is not for the purpose of us to go around and tell people the meaning of our dreams or other people's dreams. People can come to me with their dreams and say, Mary, would you please tell me what the meaning of my dream is? And I will say to them, look, if God gives you a dream, then I believe God will give you the meaning of your dream. So please, I want to establish that right now, that the gift of the word of knowledge is not for that purpose. I know that God can intervene in many different ways. Let me assume something, that if a person were an unbeliever and God were to give this person a dream and they didn't know the meaning of it, and if on a given circumstance that a person who was filled with the Spirit would be there at that given time, God may, by virtue of his own sovereign plan, give such a thing. But just to go around and give the meaning of dreams, to me, is nothing short of fortune-telling. Are you following me? I'll have to clarify it some more as we go. Joseph answered Pharaoh, and he said, it is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. You know, whenever I come to a place in my ministry where people come and they desire a word from the Lord, or they desire revelation of some sort to help meet the needs of their life, I am always keenly, very, very keenly aware of my own inadequacies, my own inabilities. And let me tell you this, that I become very, very, extremely conscious that any revelation that is given that's humanly impossible always comes from God. And it amazes me when I receive it just as much as it amazes the person who receives it. Will you come back and join us next time? And we're going to carry on with the story of Joseph with some more exciting events in his life.